Cop disrespects black FBI agent. 2 minutes later. He's the one in handcuffs. Sir, please, my daughter's waiting for me. I just want to get home. Jordan Elias hadn't expected this shift to stretch past 10 hours, but duty didn't end when the clock did. As a senior field agent with the FBI's Norfolk office, paperwork was half the battle, and today's battle had bled long into the golden hour. He had promised his daughter Mia a home-cooked dinner. That promise was now floating in the rearview mirror, along with the flashing red and blue lights that had been tailing his black Dodge Charger for the last 2 blocks. He wasn't speeding. Hell, he was doing 28 in a 35-zone air conditioning, low, the weight of the day pressing down on his shoulders. The neighborhood was quiet, sun grazing the rooftops, a few kids still on bikes, sprinklers ticking somewhere in the distance. He'd driven through this residential stretch near Petersburg 100 times before, but tonight something was different. He could feel it. He could feel the patrol SUV pulling closer, tighter. Not a siren, just the lights like a silent verdict already delivered. Jordan signaled and pulled over to the curb. He didn't sigh. Didn't curse. He simply placed both hands firmly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, turned off the engine, and rolled the window down halfway. He had done this dance before. Not often, but enough to know the moves. He wasn't here to make a point. He was here to make it home. A figure emerged from the SUV, stocky mid-30s, sunglasses at dusk. Jordan didn't need to see the badge to know who he was dealing with. The posture said everything, the wide stance, the hand hovering just a little too close to the holster, the jaw clenched like he'd been waiting all day for someone to step out of line. The name tag read, Cutter. Fitting. Evenin'. You live around here. The tone wasn't casual. It was interrogatory. Jordan kept his eyes forward. I do. License and registration. My wallet's in my jacket on the passenger seat. Registration's in the glove box. I'm going to reach for them slowly. No response. Just that lingering stare. Jordan moved deliberately, no sharp motions. He retrieved the items and laid them on the dash. May I ask why I was stopped? Officer, you were creeping, Cutter replied flatly as if the word had legal weight. Looking into houses. Someone called it in. I was driving 28, just trying to get home. Cutter didn't take the documents. His hand stayed near his belt. You got anything in the car I should know about? Jordan's jaw tensed. No, sir, and I don't consent to any searches. You acting nervous, son? I'm not nervous. I'm exhausted. I've been working since 7 this morning. Step out of the vehicle. Jordan blinked. For what reason? I gave you a command. Jordan exhaled slowly. This was spiraling fast. Officer, he said, lifting his hand slightly and tilting his voice downward, calm but firm. I am a federal agent, FBI. Badge and credentials are in this wallet. I'm reaching now. I don't care who you say you are. Out of the car. The words landed harder than a shout. Jordan didn't flinch. He held up the wallet, opened it fully, letting the gold badge and photo ID catch what little light remained. Special Agent Jordan Elias, Norfolk Field Office. Please verify my identity before proceeding further. Cutter didn't look at the badge, didn't even glance. He reached for his radio. Unit 24. Male subject refusing to comply. Claims to be FBI, requesting backup. Jordan stared at him through him. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't a mistake. This was power flexed in the face of restraint. Sir Jordan said, voice low, controlled, you're making a mistake. But Cutter didn't care. He was already moving forward. Jordan glanced down briefly at the slim silver bracelet on his wrist. A gift from his daughter etched with one word, steady. He had worn it every day since she gave it to him last Christmas. It reminded him who he was, and more importantly, why he stayed calm, even when the world wanted him to break. He opened the door slowly, stepped out, hands raised. I'm complying, he said clearly. But I need your supervisor on scene immediately. What Cutter did next wasn't protocol, it was personal. He shoved Jordan hard on the shoulder, not enough to injure, but more than enough to humiliate. Jordan didn't react, didn't recoil, didn't respond. That was his choice. That was his power. "You threatening me?" Cutter barked. "No," Jordan said, voice like stone. "That's not a threat. That's a warning." And then Cutter reached for the cuffs. Click. The silver clamped over Jordan's right wrist. Across the street, a sprinkler hissed into silence. A man walking his dog stopped. A teenager on the porch held up his phone recording. Jordan turned his head slightly toward the camera. "I want to be very clear," he said, voice loud, deliberate, resonating across the street. "I am Special Agent Jordan Elias of the FBI. I am being unlawfully detained. I have not resisted. This officer is violating federal protocol. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. Not just in Jordan, but in the people watching. And in what came next. You don't belong here, and if you're lying, you're going down hard." Officer Brian Cutter leaned in, voice low, eyes gleaming with something that had nothing to do with justice. His breath carried the stale scent of arrogance and unchallenged power. Jordan Elias stood cuffed beside his own car badge wallet, still untouched, resting on the hood like a silenced witness. He had trained dozens of officers like Cutter. He had de-escalated federal standoffs, sat through hearings on civil liberties, testified before congressional panels. But nothing, not credentials, not calm, not truth seemed to matter right now. A woman watering her plants across the street had stopped mid-motion, the hose still running as water splashed onto the concrete. A man with a shepherd mix on a leash had frozen. And the teen on the porch, Miguel Santiago Jordan would later learn, was still filming his phone steady, despite the tension rippling through the air. The silver bracelet on Jordan's wrist pressed against the cuff, digging into his skin. The word steady, once a comfort, now a silent dare. Hold the line. His jaw clenched, not from pain, but from the weight of choosing silence when every nerve screamed for protest. He wasn't just holding ground. He was holding the mirror up to a system built on selective seeing. "I don't want an apology," Jordan said quietly. His voice meant more for the camera than the officer. "I want accountability." Cutter muttered something into his shoulder mic words that sounded official, but lacked integrity. Male suspect in custody. Backup en route. ETA 2 minutes. Suspect. That word alone felt like a verdict. Jordan didn't move, didn't plead, didn't justify. Instead, he let the silence around him thicken, forcing everyone watching to sit with the discomfort. His entire career had been about control of evidence, of narrative, of truth. But this was raw. This was a collision between identity and perception, and for the first time in years, Jordan felt the icy edge of powerlessness. Then came the sirens, not blaring but distant building. One cruiser, then another, a third lagging behind. Lights flared against the fading orange skyline. The lead vehicle rolled up with command precision engine quiet presence loud. The door opened, and out stepped a woman whose posture didn't ask for attention, it demanded it. Lieutenant Amelia Rourke, mid-40s, slim build, high-ranking, sharp bun, sharper eyes. She took in the scene in one sweeping glance, a cuffed black man standing beside a black Charger, calm and silent. A puffed-up patrolman vibrating with defensiveness, bystanders with cameras raised, and most importantly, a badge wallet sitting ignored on the hood. "Status," she called out. Cutter straightened like a schoolboy. Suspect was driving suspiciously, creeping through the neighborhood, claimed to be FBI, refused to exit vehicle when ordered. Rourke's gaze shifted to Jordan, who met her eyes evenly, silently. She stepped forward, picked up the badge wallet, flipped it open. The badge glinted gold under the last rays of sun. Her head jerked up. Her tone shifted. "Special Agent Elias?" she asked, voice taut with realization. Jordan nodded once. "That's correct." Cutter squinted, confused. "Wait." What Rourke closed the wallet sharply. "You cuffed a federal agent. He refused my commands, said he was FBI. I didn't believe him. Protocol," she said, her voice now ice, "requires verification before detainment. Which part of that did you miss?" Cutter opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Are you injured?" Agent Elias? No, Jordan replied. Just disrespected. She turned. Officer Vega, uncuff him. Vega, younger hesitant, moved forward and did as instructed. The cuffs came off. Red marks bloomed on Jordan's wrists. He flexed them slowly, but his eyes stayed locked on Cutter. Are you carrying agent off duty? No weapon. Rourke nodded. We'll get this documented immediately. Cutter stepped forward again, trying to salvage control. Lieutenant, with all due respect, he was evasive, vague. I was following a call. Was the vehicle stolen? She asked, cutting him off. No. Was he aggressive? No. Did he resist? He had an attitude. The silence that followed was thunderous, an attitude she repeated as if tasting something rotten. Jordan spoke, then voice dry. You ever wonder why having an attitude is code for non-compliance when it comes to people who look like me? Rourke didn't smile, didn't nod, but her eyes said everything. Officer Cutter, she said, body cam footage. Now. In the car, he muttered, go get it. As he stomped off, Jordan turned slightly to Rourke. You saved him. She didn't ask what he meant. I've seen that look in too many men. Good ones, bad ones. That wasn't policing, that was ego. Jordan glanced at Miguel on the porch, still recording. The camera never flinched. He gave a small nod, not of gratitude, but recognition. The kid held the truth now. And it was heavy. Do you think anything will come of this? Jordan asked, watching Cutter dig through his cruiser. Rourke didn't answer. Because that answer depended on who was watching and how loud they were willing to be. That badge doesn't make you right, but it damn well means you should be seen. Jordan Elias stood beside his car, wrists red from the cuffs that had just come off, but his posture unshaken. Officer Brian Cutter returned reluctantly, carrying the body cam unit like a reluctant child, bringing back a broken toy. There was no swagger in his stride, now just confusion. The weight of what was coming hadn't fully registered, but it would. Lieutenant Amelia Rourke didn't wait for ceremony. She held out her hand. Cutter hesitated, but the silence between them made refusal impossible. He handed it over. Rourke tapped the device, pressed play. The footage lit up in the dying light. Officers nearby leaned in, but no one spoke. The screen was small, but the truth didn't need size to hit hard. You live around here, I do. My wallet's in my jacket. Registration's in the glove box. I'm a federal agent, FBI. I've already identified myself. The voice that came through was Jordan's calm, deliberate, devoid of aggression. No shouting, no panic, just composure honed by years of having to be twice as controlled, twice as cautious. Jordan didn't watch the screen. He watched Cutter instead. And Cutter. He watched the sidewalk. Each word from the recording cut deeper than the last. The slow escalation, the refusal to verify the ID, the shove, the cuffs. By the time the footage reached the part where Jordan said, I'm not a threat, I'm just trying to get home, the only sound left was the low hum of cruiser engines and the cicadas starting to sing into the twilight. Rourke clicked the footage off and handed the device back, her jaw tight. You violated protocol, she said, eyes on Cutter. You escalated without cause. You ignored identification and detained a federal officer unlawfully. Cutter shifted his weight. Lieutenant, this guy. He had an attitude. He challenged me. Rourke's voice was sharp, even, but devastating. You ever ask yourself why he might have had an attitude? Officer. Maybe it had something to do with being treated like a suspect in his own neighborhood for doing nothing but driving under the speed limit. The implication lingered like smoke. Jordan didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. His restraint was louder than any outburst. What if that kid wasn't filming? Rourke asked. What would have happened then? Miguel flinched on the porch, gripping his phone tighter. Jordan turned slightly toward him. You got it all? Miguel nodded, voice barely audible. Every second. Keep it safe, Jordan said. Not for me, for you. That moment wasn't just advice, it was a handoff. A generational baton of truth, because cameras could be deleted, stories rewritten, But if enough people really saw the truth, had a chance to breathe. Cutter opened his mouth again, desperate to regain ground. I was following procedure. Someone called in a suspicious vehicle. Suspicious, Jordan echoed. Because I was driving slowly, in my own state, with federal clearance. Rourke took a step forward, eyes locked on Cutter. You know what I see when I look at him, a man who followed every rule. And what I see when I look at you, a man who made a choice to ignore every one of them. Cutter's face was pale now. His radio buzzed on his shoulder dispatch noise, but no one answered. The air was too thick with the weight of truth. Jordan exhaled slowly. He reached up, ran his thumb across the silver bracelet still pressing against his sore skin. He thought of Mia, his daughter. Her eyes. Her voice earlier that day promising spaghetti night. The bracelet was a symbol, but also a boundary. It reminded him that strength wasn't in how hard you pushed back. It was in how long you could hold your center without falling. Rourke turned to Officer Vega. Take Officer Cutter into custody. Standard procedure. Miranda rights. Same as anyone else. The street held its breath. What? Cutter blinked. Wait, are you serious? You assaulted a federal agent, Rourke replied, and lied in your report. The cuffs came out again, but this time they didn't wrap around Jordan's wrists. Miguel's phone was still recording, and this time the system wasn't ignoring what it saw. You're arresting me for doing my job. Cutter's voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. His badge had always been a shield, never a mirror. But now, as Officer Vega gently but firmly took hold of his wrists, the metal cuffs clicked shut with a clarity that echoed louder than sirens. For the first time that evening, Jordan Elias looked away, not out of mercy, but because this moment wasn't about Cutter's downfall. It was about drawing a line in the concrete. The silence that followed was a rare kind, the kind that held truth. A woman across the street slowly turned off her garden hose. The dog walker stood still, phone out, but arms slack. Miguel Santiago's recording hand didn't even tremble. It wasn't vengeance in the air. It was justice, a quiet, measured weight that finally landed where it belonged. Lieutenant Rourke didn't gloat. She stayed focused, already pulling a small notepad from her uniform pocket. Put him in the back of your unit, she said to Vega. I'll write up the charges. Cutter glanced back at her one last time, eyes wild. Come on, Amelia. You're really doing this? She stared at him, unmoved. You think you're above this? I made a call based on behavior. I thought he was lying. No. She snapped, her voice still low but sharper now. You didn't think. You reacted. You saw what you wanted to see and ignored what didn't fit your version of control. Cutter laughed, once dry bitter. So now I'm the bad guy? You're the guy who thought the rules didn't apply to him. Vega shut the cruiser door, and just like that, Cutter was no longer holding the narrative. Jordan stepped back to his car, the soreness in his wrists throbbing slightly, the imprint of the cuffs still fresh. He leaned against the driver's door, grounding himself. He wasn't just a federal agent tonight. He wasn't even just a father trying to make it home. He was the thread in a much larger fabric, one woven with tension, stitched with silence, and now finally being pulled toward something honest. Rourke approached him again, hands behind her back, posture respectful. Agent Elias, I'm sorry. No excuses. What happened tonight shouldn't have happened. Jordan gave a tight nod. I appreciate that. But let's not pretend this is rare. She didn't flinch. It's not. But tonight somebody saw it. That matters. They stood there in the dimming light, surrounded by witnesses and accountability, the last glow of day bleeding into the shadows. Do you want to file an internal complaint or have the Bureau handle it? She asked. I'll go through Bureau channels, he said. But I want full access to the footage. You'll have it. Already secured and backed up. Jordan looked over her shoulder at Miguel, who was still standing near the curb phone in hand, thumbs dancing across the screen. That video's probably viral by now, he said. Good, Rourke replied. Let the truth run. He paused, then added, "Do you mind if I see the footage one more time from your angle?" She hesitated for a beat, then tapped her body cam and played the clip. The screen glowed between them. There he was behind the wheel. Calm, controlled, compliant. And then Cutter's voice rising with each line of disrespect. "Officer, I'm a federal agent. I don't care who you say you are. Out of the car now." Jordan watched it like an out-of-body experience, like he was witnessing another version of himself, one who didn't flinch, didn't shout, didn't give them anything to twist. And yet he had still been caged. He closed his eyes for a beat and breathed deeply. "You mind sending that to me?" Rourke nodded. "Already did." Just then, Miguel stepped forward, his voice low but strong. "You were real composed, man. Didn't yell, didn't swing, didn't even flinch." Jordan turned to him, his expression calm but serious. "I shouldn't have to stay composed to stay safe. But sometimes that's what survival demands." Miguel looked down, the weight of those words hitting heavier than he expected. "If it was me, I don't know if I could have done that." Jordan stepped closer, voice soft but direct. "Then you learn. You don't have to prove you're calm to stay alive. But if the day comes, and it's you, breathe. And hold the truth steady." "What's your name?" Jordan asked. "Miguel." "Well, Miguel, keep that video safe. Not for me. For you." The boy nodded slowly, wide-eyed. "Yes, sir." Jordan turned back to his car, hand brushing the roof fingers, needing something solid. But before he could open the door, Rourke called out one last time. "Agent Elias, before you go, I need a formal witness statement. You want to do it here or at the station?" Jordan glanced down the block. Neighbors were slowly returning indoors, but the weight of what had happened still hung thick in the air. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "Right now I just want to go home." Rourke nodded, offering no pushback. "Understood." He opened the driver's door and paused. "You think anything will actually happen to him?" Rourke didn't answer right away. She crossed her arms, thoughtful. "I can't promise discipline, but tonight I can promise truth." Jordan considered that. Not as comfort, but as a start. They're watching now. That's what Miguel said, as he stood beside Lieutenant Rourke, eyes fixed on the squad car pulling away with Cutter in the back seat. The words didn't come out with defiance or pride, just quiet certainty. And in that stillness, Jordan Elias felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel all night: hope. Not the naive kind. Not the kind you light like a candle in the dark. This was the kind born from evidence, a digital thread now looping across social media, impossible to ignore. The moment Jordan pulled away from the curb and drove toward Petersburg, the adrenaline finally started to leave his system. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, but his mind stayed razor sharp. He didn't drive fast. He didn't blast music. He just let the windows down and let the night air carry away the heat of the cuffs, of the silence of all the moments he wanted to shout, and chose stillness instead. When he arrived home, his daughter Mia was curled up on the couch, still in her school hoodie. One sock missing a cartoon paused on the screen. She looked up, blinking sleepily, then smiled. "Daddy," she whispered, rubbing her eyes. "You're late." "I know," baby Jordan said, his voice cracking slightly. "But I'm here." He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stared at the bracelet still on his wrist, the one she had made silver letters spelling steady, now framed by faint red marks from the cuffs. She didn't notice. She just held his hand until sleep pulled her under. The next morning, the world had already changed. Jordan's phone was flooded calls from bureau officials, emails from internal affairs, texts from colleagues who had seen the video. Reporters had reached out too, some with verified accounts and headlines ready. But Jordan didn't respond. Not yet. He sat at his kitchen table with black coffee going cold and watched Miguel's video on loop. Again and again, Cutter's voice barking commands, Jordan's stillness. The moment Rourke arrived, the shift in power, the click of the cuffs being reversed. There was a heaviness to it, but also something more. Proof, the kind that couldn't be spun or scrubbed. By mid-morning, his bureau chief called directly. Jordan let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, an official bureau vehicle pulled into his driveway. Rourke stepped out. Not in uniform today, just a plain navy jacket, slacks, and that same posture that said she didn't need to announce authority to carry it. Jordan opened the door before she knocked. "Didn't expect you so soon," he said. "I didn't want this to wait," she replied. "There's something you need to see." She handed him a tablet. On the screen was Cutter's initial incident report. He had submitted it just before backup arrived. It was short, but telling subject was evasive. Refused orders, gave false identification, escalated verbally. Jordan looked up. "None of that happened." Rourke nodded. "Exactly. That's why this isn't just about a bad call. It's about a deliberate lie entered into the system. That's perjury and falsification." Jordan stared at the screen, letting the weight of that realization settle. Not just mistreatment, not just bias, a written attempt to erase the truth. "He's not suspended anymore," Rourke said. "He's under formal criminal investigation." Jordan put the tablet down and leaned back. And the video already backed up across 3 secure servers: Internal Affairs, Federal Compliance, Civil Rights Division. "And Miguel?" he asked. "He's safe," Rourke replied. "His mom is a nurse. She reached out this morning, said her son never looked more certain of who he wants to be." Jordan smiled faintly. "He'll remember this night. For better and worse." Rourke tilted her head. "So will a lot of people." He looked out the window. The sunlight hit the table just right, casting a glow over his untouched coffee and the badge lying beside it. The badge was heavy, but not nearly as heavy as silence. "What do you plan to do next?" Rourke asked. Jordan didn't answer right away, because the next move wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been pulled over and told they didn't belong. How many times does the truth have to show up before people actually see it? Jordan Elias sat before a row of bureau officials, not in a courtroom, not in a press conference, but in a modest internal hearing room with beige walls and a stale ceiling fan ticking in the corner. Across from him sat Assistant Director Nolan Griggs, flanked by 2 compliance officers and 1 member of the Civil Rights Oversight Panel. This wasn't punishment. This was a review. But the weight in the room felt heavier than justice. It felt like legacy. "I gave every warning," Jordan said, voice measured, eyes steady. "I identified myself. I followed protocol. He didn't just ignore me. He rewrote the story before it even ended." Griggs tapped a pen against his folder. "We reviewed both body cam footage and the civilian recording. No inconsistencies. Everything aligns with your account." "That's not the issue," Jordan replied. "The issue is how easy it was to dismiss the badge. To dismiss me, and how many others it's happened to without a camera watching." The civil rights officer, a middle-aged woman named Yvonne, leaned forward. "Agent Elias, what are you asking for? Accountability has begun. Prosecution is underway. What do you want beyond that?" Jordan looked down at his wrist. The faint red marks had faded, but the silver bracelet still shimmered. Steady. Not a mantra, a mission. "I want institutional memory," he said. "I want it in training and field assessments and leadership evaluations. Not just a footnote, not just a lesson for one rogue officer. A framework." The room fell silent. Not from resistance, but from the realization that Jordan wasn't just reacting. He was rebuilding. That afternoon he met Miguel and his mother at a small community center. They'd requested the meeting not as witnesses, but as citizens who wanted to understand what came next. Miguel's eyes were bright, but his hands were fidgeting. "Is he going to jail?" Jordan didn't answer right away. "That depends on the system. And the system depends on people who hold it together and hold it accountable." Miguel looked down. "It just feels like if no one had recorded—" "You're right," Jordan said. That's the part that keeps me up. Not what happened to me, but what almost did. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Miguel's mom asked gently, "What happens now?" Jordan pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the table. "This," he said, "is not just evidence. It's curriculum. We're building a training program for officers, one that includes this footage, this report, this story, not as a cautionary tale, as a turning point." Miguel blinked. "For real," Jordan nodded. "I've already started drafting it. With Rourke. With oversight. The bureau's agreed to pilot it next quarter." Miguel's mom reached out and touched the flash drive. "That's more than I thought would ever come from something like this." Jordan smiled faintly. "That's because most stories like this don't get finished. They get buried under paperwork, or buried with the person who couldn't tell it." Later that evening, alone in his home office, Jordan opened an old photo album. Inside was a yellowed picture of his father, also a federal agent, standing beside a cruiser in the 1980s. Hands firm, smile tight, eyes tired. Jordan had once asked him if the badge made things easier. His father had shaken his head and said, "No, it just makes it harder to pretend you don't see." Now Jordan understood. The badge wasn't a shield. It was a mirror, one that demanded you reflect not just your identity, but your integrity. He placed the album beside his laptop and began typing. A new document, a new beginning. Title: The Elias Protocol. Truth Before Power. And just as he saved the file, his phone buzzed. It was an email from a precinct in Minneapolis. Subject line requesting permission to use your video training module. He stared at it for a long second. The ripple had begun. "You don't remember me, do you?" The voice came from behind Jordan as he exited the conference room at the Bureau's DC headquarters. The hallway was quiet, bathed in a soft, late-afternoon light, the kind that made everything feel just a little more surreal. Jordan turned slowly and saw a man in a charcoal suit with a badge clipped to his belt, Special Agent Thomas Kearns. There was something familiar about him. Not his face, but his presence, like déjà vu with tension baked in. "We met years ago," Kearns said. "Your first field interview. I was the training evaluator." He paused, gaze unreadable. "You said something then I never forgot." Jordan searched his memory. "What was it?" "You said, 'We don't get to change the rules, but we can change what happens when they're broken.'" "I didn't get it then. I do now." Jordan didn't respond. He didn't trust compliments from people who once dismissed his caution as over-preparation. But Kearns wasn't there to flatter. "I was at a leadership seminar last week," he continued. "They played the clip. Your clip. Not the body cam Miguel's. The one where you didn't move, didn't raise your voice, just said, 'I am not resisting. I am not a threat.'" Kearns paused. "You taught the room more in 30 seconds than most manuals teach in 30 hours. Jordan shifted, uncomfortable with the sudden reverence. "It's not just about me," he said. "It's about everyone who couldn't record their moment, who didn't make it to the training seminar." Kearns nodded. "That's why I'm here. I want in. I want to help build it." Jordan studied him for a beat longer, weighing sincerity against timing. "Why now?" "Because I used to think not being part of the problem was enough," Kearns said. "Now I know silence is the problem." Later that week, Jordan found himself at a town hall forum in Richmond, standing before a crowd of over 300 people. Some in uniform, some not. All of them holding on to questions he couldn't fully answer, but was willing to stand with. The moderator asked the obvious one. "How did it feel in that moment, being ignored by someone who swore to uphold the same law you do?" Jordan didn't flinch. It didn't feel like shock. It felt like recognition. Like something I'd seen in the mirror my whole life. But what hurt most wasn't being ignored. It was how easy it was for him to write a false story, and how many would have believed it if no one had filmed. A hush spread across the room. He scanned the audience and saw Miguel sitting beside his mom. The boy gave a subtle nod. "Still filming." After the forum, an older man approached Jordan, his movements slow but deliberate. "You reminded me of my brother," he said. "He was a postal inspector, got pulled over 3 times in 1 week in the 70s. No badge could protect him either." Jordan gave a small smile. "Then we keep going. So no one needs a badge to feel safe on their own street." As he walked back to his car, his phone buzzed. A notification from the Bureau's internal network, the Elias Protocol, officially adopted as mandatory de-escalation training nationwide. Jordan stopped in his tracks, read it twice. Then slowly he placed his hand on the car door, same as that night, and felt the metal under his palm. Cold but steady. He looked at the sky above, lit with a warm twilight, and whispered, not for the cameras, not for the system, but for himself. This time, it changed something. But just before he got in, another message popped up. From a name he hadn't seen in years. Subject: "We need to talk. It's about your father. Your father warned us. We just didn't listen." The message had come late the night before, but it stayed with Jordan like a drumbeat. The sender, S. Redford, a retired bureau analyst who'd worked alongside his father decades ago. The subject, a sealed file marked "Confidential, Civilian Harm Incidents 1983. Jordan hadn't even known the file existed. Now he stood in the archives wing of the Richmond field office, flipping through records long thought buried not just in dust, but in silence. The documents weren't just data. They were echoes. Complaints, memos, internal notes, all pointing to a pattern his father had tried to expose before he died. Patterns of traffic stops, false reports, silenced footage. The very same system Jordan had nearly been devoured by had once come for his father, too. Redford sat across the table, older than the photo Jordan had seen, but sharp-eyed. "Your dad filed an internal warning in 1984, he said, tapping the folder. He said, "If the badge loses integrity, it becomes a weapon, not a symbol." Jordan didn't speak. He couldn't, because here it was a thread tying father to son, past to present. The moment he was stopped wasn't random. It was repetition. "You think you're the first to try to fix this?" Redford asked. "You're not. But maybe you're the first they can't ignore." Jordan slowly closed the folder and stood. He wasn't just continuing a legacy, now he was correcting the record. That evening, standing on the steps of the Richmond Civil Hall, he faced a crowd of reporters, cameras, lights, and somewhere out there millions of eyes watching live. He didn't read from a statement. He didn't need to. "My name is Jordan Elias. I am a federal agent, a father, a black man in America, and I was detained, disrespected, and almost erased for doing nothing but driving home." He held up the bracelet, steady, and continued. "But I'm not here to recount trauma. I'm here to declare accountability. The Elias Protocol is just a start. Not because I was mistreated, but because so many still are, and they don't have cameras, badges, or titles to protect them." He paused. "Let it land. My father tried to warn you 40 years ago. You called it exaggeration. I lived it, and now you're watching it. So the question is no longer, did it happen? It's, what are we going to do now that we know?" Behind him, Lieutenant Rourke stepped up and placed her hand on his shoulder. It wasn't for comfort. It was solidarity. Later, Jordan sat in Mia's room as she read him a story for once, her little voice rising and falling with the rhythm of heroes and dragons. And as she read, she glanced up. "Daddy," she said. "Are you famous now?" Jordan smiled softly. "Not famous, just seen." And as she drifted to sleep, her hand gripping his, he looked at the bracelet again. It had started as a gift from his daughter. But now steady was more than a symbol. It was a promise. To her. To his father. To the kid on the porch with the phone. To the next person pulled over for fitting a description they never chose. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't viral. Justice was showing up. And staying.